Okay, so today, first of all, welcome to class. We're all going to take a cleansing breath and make it work now. Okay, no questions from last week. Okay, so our article for today. More than 24 people are sick after eating at a steakhouse. The rice is blamed. According to numerous press reports, several 911 calls were made around late Saturday afternoon, alerting first responders to illnesses occurring at Kumo Japanese Steakhouse in Stony Brook, New York. The county spokesperson said that a total of 28 people reported getting sick. 12 of them were rushed to the hospital for treatment and were discharged. The Suffolk Department of Health believes that the likely culprit was mishandled and improperly stored cooked rice that was served at a restaurant. Witnesses report that people were vomiting on the scene. The county health department said the incident was a result of restaurant mishandling and improperly storing cooked rice. Out of 15 violations issued against the Japanese steakhouse, 8 were risk factors for foodborne illnesses. Okay. Improperly stored cooked rice can be a cause of food poisoning. Uncooked rice often contains the bacteria Bacillus cereus. These bacteria can form protective spores that survive the cooking process. And if the rice is cooled slowly and left between 5 degrees and this is Celsius, 5 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius, the bacteria spores can germinate, grow, and produce toxins that cause vomiting. Bacillus cereus is an anaerobic, right, no air, toxin-producing gram-positive bacterium found in soil, vegetation, and food. It commonly causes intestinal illnesses with nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. However, it has also been associated with serious infections for immunocompromised individuals and can cause septicemia. All right, as well as endophlebitis, which can lead to vision loss. All right, this is why we're talking about cooties and bugs today, because Bacillus cereus is one of those cooties and bugs that we can control, and that was the whole point of that article, is folks were not following good protocol in handling the rice, okay? So we're going to learn about these, a lot of these bacteria today, these pathogens in Chapter 2. And then we are going to, as we progress through the book, you will start to understand ways that we can control. A lot of it, most of it, is time temperature abuse, which is right in this chapter. That's why I kind of tease this chapter out, because it's pretty full of information that we need to be really well versed in. So make yourself flashcards, return to this chapter 2 time and again. It's not that it's more important than the rest of the book, but it's kind of a foundational point for a lot of what we talk about, okay? So again, on page 21, we've got key terms. There is a big, long list of key terms. You're going to want to know what all of these mean, okay? The definitions of them. It really does help. All right. And just remember that any picture, any of these, if it's got a big yellow big 6 next to it, you're going to want to know it, but you're also going to want to know the other ones, okay? All right, so let's go through here. So after completing this chapter, you should be able to identify conditions that affect the growth of foodborne bacteria known as FAT-TOM. All right, anytime you see an acronym like that, you want to know what it means, all right? As I said last week, they keep adding acronyms, and it is really like mind-boggling, but this one's been around for a long time, and it is actually quite helpful. Describe the characteristics of major foodborne pathogens, what their sources and resulting illnesses and symptoms are, And then you're going to describe ways to prevent viral, bacterial, parasitic, and fungal contamination, and characterize naturally occurring toxins and ways to prevent illnesses caused by them. Okay? All right. Okay, so you're going to want to know these three terms. Biological contamination is a serious risk to food safety, and it occurs from microorganisms. So microorganisms are any small living organism that can only be seen with a microscope. All right. A pathogen is a harmful microorganism. It's what can make people sick when it's eaten, or it produces toxins that can cause illness. And then a toxin is poison. So that, just think of, any kind of toxic material, any chemical. We see the cross and the skull and crossbones, poison, right? So know that a microorganism, we are covered in microorganisms. Our world is full of microorganisms. They're not all harmful, but a pathogen is a harmful microorganism, and that's the one we talk about in preventing food poisoning. And then toxin is a poison, okay? So ways that food handlers, that is us, can contaminate food include not washing hands after using the restroom, gross, nasty people, sneezing or vomiting onto food or food contact surfaces, allowing ready-to-eat food touch a surface that was that contacted raw meat, seafood, or poultry, and what is that called? Contamination, very good. Storing food or cleaning products incorrectly, and failing to spot signs of pests. Okay, so these are all things that if we know about them, we can prevent a lot of problems. Okay, all right. Symptoms of foodborne illness include diarrhea, vomiting, fever, nausea, abdominal cramps, and jaundice. Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, let me go back here. I'm going back to page 22. When we're talking about not washing hands after using the restroom, they want you to understand it's known as the fecal oral route, which means you have used the restroom, you have not washed your hands, and so all that bacteria is on your hands, and then you touch food or food surfaces, and that is how the contamination happens. So understand what the fecal oral route is. You're going to hear a lot about it today. It's disgusting. If you are one of those people that doesn't wash your hands after using the bathroom, shame on you, okay? All right, so, jaundice. Jaundice is a yellowing of the skin, or here you can see in this gentleman's eyes on page 23, or up here on the screen, okay? So your eyes get really yellow. This is, it's a symptom known as jaundice, and it is generally associated with hepatitis, all right? So if you see somebody looking like this coming into work, you know they may possibly have something that is caused by a foodborne illness, okay? How quickly a foodborne illness symptom occurs in a person is known as the onset time, right? How long it takes. Onset times depend on the type of foodborne illness. That can range from as little as 30 minutes, like in our example, all right? Or it could be as long as 6 weeks out. So you can tell if you are the person who is in charge of researching and kind of being the sleuth and figuring out how this foodborne illness was happening. It can be real tricky. 6 weeks out is a long time. I don't remember what I ate yesterday, right? So it can be a real challenge to people, all right? All right. These are the big 6 pathogens. You need to know these inside, outside, upside down. You need to know what they all are, what they do, how you can contract them. It is all in your book, okay? So the differences between all of them. Do they give me? No. Okay. We are I think we do have slides on these later in the book. I think we I think we do. If we don't, we'll loop back to it. Okay, so Salmonella typhi, Shigella, non-typhoidal Salmonella, then I can never say this whole thing, Shiga toxin producing Escherichia coli, better known as E. coli, which is how we will refer to it from now on. It's the way the public understands it. So E. coli, hepatitis A, which is what we're looking for in that jaundice, and norovirus. All right, has anybody ever heard of norovirus? That is also a big one that's on the news. Serena, do you remember where you contract that one? Cruise ships. Cruise ships are huge. Okay, norovirus. It's wildfire. It spreads like wildfire. And when you're on a contained place like a cruise ship, if one person gets it, lots of people get it. Okay? So know these 6. When you go into your book, you will see them marked, like on page 42. They're in gold, as opposed to the rest of the pages where the other ones are, I think, in blue. All right, so they try and give you a heads up, and it's got a little tag up here that says Big 6 on it. Know that. But you still are responsible for being familiar with the other ones. All right, okay, so bacteria. Bacteria are single-celled living microorganisms that can spoil food and cause foodborne illnesses. Bacteria share some similar characteristics, so they can be found almost everywhere. You cannot see, smell, or taste bacteria. They just exist. They grow rapidly if conditions are correct, and we're going to talk about that. They can produce toxins as they grow and die. And then they need these 6 conditions to grow, known as Fat Tom. Okay, so here's what these ones mean. Fat Tom. F is for the type of food. So time-controlled sensitive food, time temperature controlled sensitive food, best supports the growth of bacteria. Okay, better than other foods. So a tomato sitting on the counter, it's going to decay, it's going to fall apart at some point. But once I cut it and it becomes a time-controlled sensitive food, then that bacteria and mold and things have a better chance of growing. Okay, acidity. A is for acidity. Bacteria grows best in food that contain little or no acid. Okay, so things like we talked about in my intro last week, flavored vinegars, highly unlikely to become or to grow pathogens because it's so high in acid, okay? If you look on page 26, I don't think they show it in here, do they? No. On page 26, they give you a little range here. Under acid, you're going to want to kind of remember that neutral is between 4 and it's 4 to 7. Did they give us that on here? Yes. All right. So 7.5 to 4.6 is ideal. All right. So that's kind of the middle neutral, and that's where we're going to have the most bacteria growth, is in that red zone that's in your book. Okay. So just for an example, they give us lemons and limes have a pH of 1.8 or 2.4. So they're highly acidic. Okay, mayonnaise has a pH of 3.8 to 4.0. It's right in that. It's right before we hit that red zone. Okay, and then things that have pH that is they list things like cooked corn is 7.3 to 7.6. Cantaloupe, 6.1 to 6.5. All right, so these are things that are ideal for bacterial growth. All right, you don't need to know all of those ranges, but just understand acidic and neutral, and that neutral zone is the hot zone, if you will. Okay. Temperature. Bacteria grow rapidly in the temperature danger zone. This is one of the most important things you're going to learn in this class, is that the temperature danger zone is from 41 degrees to 135 degrees. When you are studying this, do not worry about Celsius, okay? We live in the US, we use Fahrenheit. Okay, so on the exam, everything will be in Fahrenheit. So 41, so if the low end of the temperature danger zone is 41, where should our refrigerators be set at? Below 41. So 41 or below, you're in good shape. That's why we check our walk-ins, our reach-ins. That's why we recommend having a thermometer in them. And then 135. So if I'm holding food hot, there are different rules for everything, but that as long as it gets above 135, we're out of the temperature danger zone depending on what we're eating. But remember, 41 to 135, temperature danger zone. Then bacteria grow even more rapidly at 70 degrees to 125, all right? Those two zones you absolutely want to know, all right? So think about it, 70 degrees is about room temperature. So when we leave stuff sitting out on the counter, we are causing a lot of bacteria growth, all right? Did they give me the... They do not. So on page 29, they give you a kind of a graph here that shows how quick the replication is. And actually on 28, that's a better, that's more understandable for those of us who don't read graphs real well. So if you look at bacterial growth on page 28, at 0 minutes, there might be one cell of the bad bacteria. After 20 minutes, you're going to have 2. After 40, it doubles again to 4. After 60, it doubles again to 8. 80 minutes, it doubles again to 16. Once you get up to 10 hours, you can have 1 billion cells of whatever this bacteria is, all right? So we call that the logging phase. So there are different phases that we talk about. There's lag, log, stationary, and death. So lag phase is when the bacteria is introduced and they go through kind of an adjustment period. Then the log phase is where they're replicating, splitting by 2. Often is they can double as often as every 20 minutes. Then the stationary phase is when the bacteria continue to grow until they grow and die at the same rate. So they kind of hit a plateau, and then there's the death phase where they start to die off. All right. And depending on what the bacteria is, they have different lag, log, and stationary and death phases. When those bacteria are dying, sometimes they're giving off spores that are what is creating the illness, okay? So depending on what we're talking about, there are all different ways that these bacteria behave, all right? So temperature, know this, understand it, 41 to 135. Okay, and then that bacteria grow even more rapidly at room temperature, so 70 to 125, okay? So knowing those. Time, the longer the bacteria spend in these danger zones, the more time they have to grow unsafe. So we're going to learn how to control temperatures of things to kill off bacteria or prevent them from growing, and we're going to learn about time management. Okay, these are 2 biggies that we can totally have control over in our restaurants. Okay. All right. O is for oxygen. Some bacteria need oxygen to grow, while others grow when oxygen is not there. So in our article, we talked a little bit about Bacillus cereus. Last week I mentioned botulism, right? Grows in the oils. It can grow in cans. Back when I was a kid, it was big to talk about like bulging cans. If something was bulging, that it might have botulism growing in it. Less nowadays because we have better processing, but just knowing that, okay? Just because something's sealed up doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. And then, so that's oxygen. Remember, aerobic, anaerobic are words you might need to know there. So with air or without air, All right. And then moisture. Bacteria grows well in food with high levels of moisture. Okay. And where is it in this book? Moisture on page 26. Just know the symbol for water activity is this little, it's the lowercase letter A. I just walked away from it and I forgot. It's a W for water. Duh. Okay, so that little W is for water. So this is just a symbol that if you see that, you know it has to do with moisture. Okay, water activity. All right, water, actual glass of water, water activity is 1.0. Okay, so food with a water activity of 0.85 or higher is ideal for growth of bacteria. All right. All right, so that is all on this nice little visual on page 26. They do try and give you these tables. Spend time with anything that's on a table. All right. All right. So let's talk about controlling fat tom conditions. In an operation, you usually have control over these big two things. Time, so we're going to limit how long time temperature controlled sensitive food spends in the temperature danger zone, and temperature. We're going to keep those things out of the temperature danger zone. Okay? All right, and we already talked about lag, log, stationary, and death. So this is the number of bacteria gets started. We're in the temperature danger zone. They are growing, and then all of a sudden they've grown to the point where there is it doesn't support their growth anymore. They become stationary, and then they start to die off. Okay, so you don't need to know. You don't need to worry about this graph. Just know it. Just recognize. You don't even really have to know lag, log, stationary, and death. But if you see that in a question, you'll understand what it means, that it's just about bacterial growth. Okay? All right. So major foodborne bacteria number 1. So what you're going to want to know is commonly linked foods, and then most of these have similar symptoms, and the ones that have different symptoms are kind of easy to remember, and they actually make it easier to remember what that foodborne bacteria is, okay? So we hear about E. coli all the time, and the illness that we know it for when people get super sick is called hemorrhagic colitis, which means wickedly, wildly bloody diarrhea. It can be it can be deadly, especially to young children. Back before y'all were born, there was a big one that first kind of brought this to the attention of the population at large, because it was all over the news. There's a hamburger restaurant chain out west called Jack in the Box, and I should know this. I should write this in my book because I say it every semester. Like, a lot of kids got sick. I want to say like close to 100 children got sick. Children died, and it was just because they went through the drive-thru and had a burger, okay? But the ground meat was contaminated with E. coli. It was not cooked to the proper temperature, all right? So could we control the fact that the burger meat came into us with E. coli? No, because it's coming in from someplace else. But could we control the temperature at which it's cooked to? Yes, we can. Okay, so that's where we start to, we have managerial control, and it's important to know these things, okay? All right, so, and then the other thing that it's commonly linked to is contaminated produce, and I think I mentioned it last week, right? We've got the dairy farm up here, we got hundreds and hundreds of cows, they're all creating waste. Rainwater comes and it washes it down the hill, and we got lettuce growing down at the bottom of the hill. So all that E. coli from the intestines of the cow is now infecting that groundwater, and then can affect our produce, okay? So our farming practices definitely have some effect on this, All right, so knowing E. coli, commonly linked with ground beef and contaminated produce, and then we're going to get bloody diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and in severe cases, it can cause kidney failure. So it's no joke when people get it. All right. Now, in this day and age, we are much better at tracking our foods, where it comes from. So once we start to understand that there is a foodborne illness, there are all kinds of alerts that go out. And like if you're a Wegmans Shoppers Club, they'll call you and tell you, you know, like this has been on recall. It's usually on the news if it's a big one. You can also sign up at the FDA to get alerts, and they will email them to you directly. Okay. All right, so prevention measures for E. coli is controlling time and temperature. We're going to cook our ground beef to minimum internal cooking temperatures, which we're going to deal with later. I'm not going to confuse you with it today. We're going to make sure we're purchasing from approved, reputable suppliers. So we know that whoever's producing and processing this meat has been inspected. They're following protocols, so we have the best outcomes, as opposed to just, you know, going out to maybe an Amish farm and getting burger meat. Okay. And then we're going to prevent cross-contamination. That's another way. So if this ground beef is contaminated, we're not going to shape all of our burger patties or our meatloaves and then use that same space without washing, rinsing, and sanitizing before we go on to something that's ready to eat or another food process. Okay. So prevention measures, easy. Control time temperature. We will go into that in a later chapter, what all those temperatures are and times. And then just making sure that we're taking care to not cross-contaminate. Okay. Number 2, we're going to talk about non-typhoidal salmonella. Okay. So this non-typhoidal salmonella is associated mainly with poultry and eggs. That's why we have to make sure our eggs are refrigerated. Okay. Does anybody know why Europeans do not have to refrigerate their eggs?
There's a coating on the outside.
You got it. So they don't wash their eggs. So they have their own coating around the eggs so they can be left out on the counter. Here, we wash our eggs, that coating is removed, and so then that shell is air permeable. We can definitely have issues with that. So that's why they have to be stored in the refrigerator. Okay? So poultry and eggs are the biggies, dairy products, and then produce like tomatoes, peppers, and cantaloupes. Okay, those just tend to be where salmonella likes to grow. Again, diarrhea, abdominal cramp, vomiting, fever can be involved with salmonella. So that's an additional one, right? So I would say most of these you're going to end up with diarrhea, cramps, vomiting as your symptoms, but you might, if you saw a question that included as one of the choices, fever was listed in there, you might go, oh, I know, that's salmonella. Okay, if that helps you to remember. Okay. Prevention measures. We're going to prevent cross-contamination. So my grandfather, who was a butcher, would always say, chickens are a dirty bird. They have little short legs. They are housed very tightly together. They walk through their own poop all the time. Okay. So that is a big part of why they are easy, or why they can carry that contamination. So we're going to prevent cross-contamination. If it's raw, we don't want it anywhere near it. We do not wash our chickens. All right. That's, I know a lot of people like to put that chicken in the sink and wash it because they think they're getting all the salmonella off on the outside. But really, what are you doing? Where are you putting the salmonella? All over your sink and everywhere around it. Okay. If we cook this chicken to the proper temperature, we're killing off the salmonella. Okay, so we don't wash chickens. That is always a question that comes up for debate, depending on who raised you. And I always share the story that my Aunt Betty, God bless her, she was the most wonderful human, would wash her turkey with soap and water, which is really gross. All right, we're going to make sure we cook our poultry and eggs to a minimum internal temperature. We're going to exclude food handlers who are vomiting, have diarrhea, or have been diagnosed with an illness caused by non-typhoidal salmonella. This is going back to last week. There was that chart, that if-then, right? So if you have salmonella, if somebody in your household has been diagnosed with salmonella, you could be a carrier of salmonella. That means you should not be anywhere near food, okay? Excluding you means you cannot show up to work. You cannot be in the restaurant because it is so contagious. We don't want it anywhere near us, okay? So that's an exclude, one of those conditions to exclude somebody from work, right? Okay? So just know poultry, dairy, produce like tomato, peppers, and cantaloupes, and we're going to prevent cross-contamination, cook to proper internal temperatures, and that if you have salmonella or your employee has it, they have to be excluded from work, okay? All right, and let's see, is there anything else on here? All right, bacteria number 3 is Salmonella typhi. It's also known as typhoid fever. Okay, it's commonly linked to ready-to-eat foods and beverages. All right. All right. And the most common symptoms: fever, weakness, abdominal pain, headaches, loss of appetite, rash. So it's a little different than the other ones that we have talked about. All right. Salmonella typhi lives on humans. All right. So non-typhoidal salmonella that we just talked about kind of hangs around on farm animals. But typhoid fever, Salmonella typhi, is related to human beings. Okay. So the people with typhoid can carry the bacteria in their bloodstream and their intestinal tract. Fecal oral route. If you are a nasty, gross person who does not wash their hands and you don't know that you have salmonella, guess what? Everybody that you've prepared food with has now been exposed to salmonella, okay? Just takes a small amount of these bacteria to make people sick. All right? The best way we can prevent this is to prevent cross-contamination. We're going to make sure to cook food to minimum internal temperatures, but if we're doing something raw like salad and lettuce, we're going to make sure we're washing hands and wearing gloves. How often do we have to change our gloves? After every 4 hours. I find that gross, but that's the rule, okay? So we're going to make sure we're washing hands, and that's one of the things, like especially if you're in your first lab, when we go to serve other people things that are not going to be cooked, or if we're garnishing plates, we're wearing gloves. If you are in hospitality and you are not going to be cooking people food, it still relates to you. You're going to be carrying people's plates out, right? So we have recommendations of how to do that, but understanding hand washing and gloves are the best way to prevent cross-contamination or spreading our germs to other people. That's another. Exclude people who have diarrhea, vomiting, or who have been diagnosed with this illness, Salmonella typhi. Okay? So basically, if you have diarrhea or are throwing up, you should not be in the restaurant anywhere near food. Okay? Number 4, Shigella. It's commonly linked with foods that contain time-controlled sensitive food like potato salad, tuna salad, shrimp salad. Okay? It just likes that breeding ground. Or food that comes in contact with contaminated water, like produce. So, and if you look on page 36, we talk about Shigella is found in the feces of humans. So how are we going to get Shigella? Not washing your hands, okay? As Chef Ray calls it, icky poo-poo fingers, okay? All right, so most illnesses occur when people eat or drink contaminated food or water. So when we're talking about contaminated water, maybe there's been a water main break, maybe there's been a problem in your town, and once it's come to your attention, then we have to be really alert to this, okay? So, and then your most common symptoms, bloody diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and fever sometimes, okay? So you're gonna see that a lot. All right.
We had water break last.
We sure did. We had a water main break that closed down campus. That was no fun at all. Okay. And then we couldn't open until they tested the water. I think it was 3 times in 48 hours or something to make sure that, so the health department was in charge of that.
And the food place was closed.
Everything in the town was closed down 100%. Starbucks, pizza joints, we had to cancel lab, everything. Okay. All right. So to prevent sharing Shigella with others, we're going to practice good personal hygiene. We're going to wash our hands. If we are in charge, we're going to exclude our food handlers who have diarrhea or have been diagnosed with an illness caused by Shigella. And we're going to control flies inside and outside of the operation, right? Why would we worry about flies?
Because they're a contaminant.
Where do flies hang out?
Around feces.
You got it, okay? Another lovely story I share with my students. My mother-in-law grew up on a big dairy farm, and one year we were invited to a family gathering, and we arrived a little bit late, but it was in this big tent outside on the lawn, and the food had lots of flies buzzing around, and right across the street was where all the cows were. We did not eat. we went to McDonald's on the way home. All right?
Yeah, I've been there one time, yeah. Like, the amount of flies is like...
Flies are gross.
It's like, they're in mass quantity.
Flies are gross. My family thinks I'm like insane because I yell when they leave doors open in the summer and flies come in. All right. So now we've talked, that's all kinds of bacteria. Now, the thing I will tell you is if you look on, where are you? On page 32, Bacillus cereus is in a blue box. It is not a big 6, but I can guarantee you that you will see Bacillus cereus on your exam. One of the reasons is it's also known as the fried rice illness, fried rice disease, because it's about the rice. Another way to remember is Bacillus cereus sounds kind of like cereal. And if you think about cereal and grains, that's kind of where that one comes from. All right. We also have on page 32, they have this big picture of luncheon meat, Listeria monocytogenes. We know it as Listeria. Anybody here remember all over the news last summer, boar's head meat, Listeria, okay? I have their study. They had 40 pages of disgusting things in the plant that was processing, okay? So many infractions that they did not fix, and they made so many people sick, okay? I will never eat boar's head again, ever, okay? Just knowing that. So it goes back to number 1, right? They've lost my trust. I will not purchase from them anymore, okay? All right, so I want you to understand that even though those are not the big 6, you should familiarize yourself, mainly because they'll be given in listings on your exam. And when we start doing test questions, or I think even at the end of this chapter, we'll probably see them. They kind of give you, it could be this, right? And so you can, sometimes if you understand the symptoms or where they come from, you can rule out things on your exam. But it's also important to know these things. And I forgot to say this last week, but even though, especially you folks who are going to be in in our culinary program. This book is expensive, it's boring as all get out, but let me tell you what, this is a great resource because you may forget some of this, but you can always pull this off the shelf and reread like this section, familiarize yourself with things, okay? So that's one of the reasons I recommend it. Again, if you do that Quizlet app, there are questions that will help you to kind of drill into these things, okay? The other nice thing is on page 31, they give you this nice little graph here that shows you if it's gold, it's one of the big 6, but it also shows you how, the characteristics, commonly linked foods, symptoms, prevention measures, and it'll show you time, temperature, the ones that you can control, the things that you can control by, reheating things, holding things at proper temperatures. So this graph on page 31 is very helpful. All right. All right, now we're going to talk about viruses. So location of viruses. Viruses are different than bacteria. All right. Viruses are the smallest of the microbial food contaminants, and they share some basic characteristics with, or viruses share, no matter what the virus is, basic characteristics. So the location, they are carried by human beings and animals, right? Our cats and dogs can get sick with viruses, but they require a living host. Sources of viruses, food, water, or any contaminated surface, right? So things can grow in food or contaminated water. If I sneeze or cough all over a surface and somebody touches it, they can then pick up my virus, right? Viruses can be transferred from person to person to food, and person to food contact surfaces. That's why if you are sick, you should not be in contact with food, okay? And typically, they occur through the fecal oral route, typically, okay? So things like COVID and the flu, not so much, that's an airborne contaminant, but most other viruses are because you're not having good hygiene and not washing your hands, fecal oral route, okay? I will tell you, this is the grossest chapter, and I hate saying fecal oral route so many times. All right. Alrighty, let's see. All right. Some viruses cannot be destroyed by normal cooking temperatures. All right. So some of it, we cook our food, any of these viruses will be killed off, but there are some viruses, like we know hepatitis A, one of those things that is really hard to kill off, and we do not want to pass that around. So prevention measures also include excluding food handlers who are vomiting or have diarrhea or jaundice, remember that yellowing of the eyes, from working. So if I know somebody is sick like this, you cannot come to work. We're going to make sure our food handlers wash their hands regularly and correctly. That's managerial control, and that's one of the new things that they really want us to stress to you in 2026. If you are in charge, it comes back on you. If my workers do not understand proper hand washing procedures, that is going to ultimately be my fault, okay? So making sure that you're training, you're discussing, you're keeping an eyeball on all of your food handlers to make sure that they have good hygiene. We're going to avoid bare hand contact with any kind of ready-to-eat food. And quick removal and cleanup of vomit is also important. It's a gross job. Nobody wants to do it, but as the manager, you are going to have a protocol in place. If somebody gets sick in the restaurant, it's this person or this, it doesn't necessarily have to be a single person, but it might be, the host or the hostess is responsible for getting that cleaned up, okay? So it's not just necessarily a named person, but it's a person with a position, all right? So you can't leave it sitting there and everybody going, that's really gross. You have to clean it up, okay? Hopefully that would be common sense. All right. So the major viruses that they want you to know is hepatitis A. Remember last week I said there are many hepatitises. Hep A is the only one that we worry about in food as a foodborne illness. It is commonly linked with ready-to-eat foods from people who are working maybe without gloves, without good hygiene, or shellfish from contaminated water. Again, we've had some kind of sewage break, whatever, and we've got shellfish growing near that water. They can become infected, okay? Most common symptoms: fever, weakness, nausea, abdominal pain, and then later on in the progress of the illness, jaundice. So sometimes it's your skin kind of takes on a golden orangey hue, your eyes, okay? So jaundice is a big one that we associate only with hepatitis, okay? All right. We're to prevent the hepatitis A, we're gonna practice good personal hygiene. Notice how that is underlined, okay? We're going to exclude food handlers we know have been diagnosed with Hep A or have had jaundice. Okay? So they have to be out of your building for 7 days. There is a protocol for allowing them to come back, which includes they have to see their doctor and have a written note, okay, saying that they are cleared to come back to work. We're going to avoid bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food, and we're going to purchase our shellfish from approved, reputable suppliers. Okay, they're going to know if there's been a problem with wastewater. They're going to know what's going on in their own businesses, and so we can feel confident that we're buying from them. And there are protocols that we go through, and we're going to talk about that in a later chapter when you are purchasing shellfish. Okay. Norovirus is the second virus that you need to know about. It's also known as norovirus gastroenteritis. Gastroenteritis is stomach bug, okay? It's going to be stomach, diarrhea, nausea, abdominal cramps. It just is really gross. It's commonly linked again, same thing, ready-to-eat food and shellfish from contaminated water, because once again, how are we going to pass this on to people? The fecal oral route. People are not washing their hands. They are spreading germs everywhere, okay? So if I've got it, this is one that is just so highly contagious that if I've got it and I'm touching doorknobs, banisters, buttons for the elevator, it passes to everybody. That's how people on cruise ships, it just flies around because there are so many people in a tight space, okay? So if I know that you have norovirus, you have to be excluded from work. Again, once we've seen this how many times on the past slides, if you know that you have a food handler who has been vomiting or has diarrhea, they cannot come to work. Or if they've been diagnosed with norovirus, okay, we know that they have it, cannot come to work until they are cleared by a medical professional, right? Practicing good personal hygiene. We're going to wash our hands. Once you are in the industry, your hands will be raw and red for the number of times you wash them. Constantly washing hands, okay? We're going to avoid bare hand contact with any kind of ready-to-eat food, and again, purchase shellfish from approved, reputable suppliers. Right, so those are the two that they want you to know about viruses. So we're going to remember bacteria are the E. coli, the salmonella, the non-typhoidal salmonella, Shigella, and then we're going to know that the two viruses that make up the big six are Hep A and norovirus. Okay, so they're different things, all under the same kind of umbrella that can cause foodborne illnesses, okay? Luckily for you guys, these are really the only two viruses you need to know, whereas we have extra bacteria, okay? All right, and then parasites. Oh, I'm sorry, fungi. We're going on to fungi next. Fungi are pathogens that spoil food and sometimes make people sick, okay? So is all mold dangerous and can it make you sick? Maybe, maybe not. But if we see mold, that means we should probably not be serving that to the public, okay? Yeasts are another thing. So you're just going to know if something looks off, smells off, isn't quite right. You're going to, you're not going to serve that to folks, okay? All right, let me just make sure I'm not missing anything in here. No. All right, then we've got biological toxins, all right? Biological toxins are generally found on seafood, plants, and mushrooms. The best way to prevention measures are purchasing from approved, reputable suppliers. Again, I mentioned last week the outbreak of illness and death out in California from people who were foraging mushrooms. No bueno, okay? Yes, Serena.
How can you tell the difference between like contaminated yeast and like the yeast that you use for like?
Because the yeast that we use for baking is it's produced specifically for that, okay? We have wild yeast all around. If you're a sourdough baker, my sourdough starter is full of wild yeast, but they're not harmful because we're refrigerating them, we're controlling their growth, okay? But there are yeasts that can produce spores and make people sick, okay? All right, hang tight. I want to go back to, did they? They did. How funny is that? Okay, and in your book on page 44, the last thing that they mention are parasites, or did I skip? Did I skip one?
Yeah.
Norovirus. Oh, I did. I skipped a whole slide. Sorry, I was going to say, I thought it was in here. Parasites, we don't talk a lot about parasites, but some things that you should know. They require a host to live. The sources generally are seafood, wild game, and food processed with contaminated water like produce, but mostly we're going to worry about things like seafood and wild game. And those are on page 45 is your graph for those. The way they do list them for you. So Anascasis simplex, Cryptosporidium parvum, you're going to Giardia duodenalis, which is going to hit your intestines, Cyclospora cyatinosis. These, you don't really need to know the names of them. Just if you see them, you go, oh yeah, that's a parasite. Don't spend a ton of time memorizing them. But if you see under the symptoms, so you're gonna serve somebody, say we're having some kind of seafood crudo, and which means raw, okay, and somebody ends up with tingling in their throat, okay. If you see anything with tingling in your throat or a fever or something quick onset, a lot of times that is kind of the buzz for you to remember that can be from a parasite. So when we are doing things like serving sushi fish has to go through a whole process where they're frozen to a certain below zero for a certain number of days to make sure that we're killing off any kind of parasite, so that when you buy sushi grade tuna, it is not the same as raw tuna that's caught off the boat, okay? So if you are going to the grocery store and they have a big, beautiful tuna belly, that's awesome. You can do lots of things with that, but it needs to be cooked, okay? If you're going to serve sushi grade, it will be identified as sushi grade, okay? And then the other thing that I have seen as questions, and just you should know if you're ever cooking in a higher end restaurant, wild game, so things that are hunted, whether it's a bird like a pheasant, if it's some kind of boar, wild boar, whatever it is, those things can also have parasites, okay? So we're going to make sure that we are cooking things to the proper internal cooking temperatures, or in sushi world, we're freezing things for the proper amount of time, okay? All right, now fungi and mold, just know if you see this, don't serve it to your guests, okay? When in doubt, throw it out is a really good thing to understand. So if you are a food handler, you're going to ask your manager about that, all right? But in general, if you see something like that, you're not going to serve it to somebody, okay? All right, and then our biological toxins, again, seafood, plants, mushrooms, poisonous. They're going to make you sick real fast. And one of the things that you, so if you see the word toxin in it, it's generally going to be associated with seafood, okay, or mushrooms. All right, so that's an easy way to remember biological toxins, okay? All right, just make sure you know who you're buying from. All right. So let's look at the discussion questions. Which type of food best supports growth of bacteria? Yes, Eric? Proteins. Anybody disagree? Correct. What food best supports the growth of bacteria? Butter, cooked rice, a loaf of bread, or chocolate cake?
Cooked rice.
Yay! Okay, that's why I read that article to you, because this seems very counterintuitive. The other one, when you look through your book, is botulism can grow in baked potatoes. People think like, it's a baked potato. What can happen? But if it's not cooled properly, that inside of that potato, especially if you wrapped it in foil, kept it warm, and it's not cooled properly, there's stuff growing in there, okay? So just know that just because it's a plant-based food doesn't mean that it's necessarily safe, okay? Is vacuum-packed food safe from the growth of bacteria? Yes, because the vacuum always destroys the bacteria. Yes, because all bacteria need oxygen to grow. No, because bacteria can grow without oxygen. Or no, because the vacuum increases the food's water activity. What do you think?
C.
You can get C. Anybody disagree with that? That is the correct answer. Remember, bacteria can grow without oxygen, like botulism. Okay? What are the two conditions for bacterial growth that you can control? Is it oxygen and acidity, acidity and moisture, temperature and moisture, or time and temperature? Anybody disagree with D? We just spent a whole chapter talking about time and temperature. What is the temperature range of the temperature danger zone? Is it 0 to 41, 31 to 60, 41 to 135, 60 to 165? Say it again. C. Correct. 41 to 135, okay? And what's the internal zone that can be even more dangerous?
70 to 125.
There you go, 71 to 125. Excellent. Okay. Jaundice is a symptom of which foodborne illness? Hepatitis A, right? Jaundice and hepatitis. Where is E. coli found? Cattle, water, poultry, or dirt?
Cattle.
Cattle, right? That's our most common. It can be in water. So this is where, right, we talked about ground runoff. Don't get hung up on that. Cattle is the glaring answer. Take it, okay? All right. A guest becomes ill with a high fever and a rash after eating at a salad bar. Which pathogen is likely the cause of that illness? So we've got a rash. So this is where we're going to go back to our not the parasites. We're going to go back to the major toxins here. All right, so this one I don't expect you to know, but just know that it's probably not salmonella. All right, so that takes out one, but it could be Vibrio vulnificus, or Anisakis simplex, or Clostridium perfringens, and it is salmonella. I went back. It is Salmonella typhi. I'm the one who's wrong. It's see, even I get backed up and turned around. It is Salmonella typhi because of the rash, high fever and rash. Okay, so that's That's why I confuse myself. We don't generally need to know these other ones. You'll see them like this. This is an example of what I was talking about, right? You're going to see them in the list, but if you know what we're really studying, that this is one of the big 6, and that there is fever and rash, you should be able to get that. I'm sorry, that was on me. Which is a basic characteristic of a virus? Is it destroyed by freezing? It grows in food? It requires a living host? Or it originates in cattle? Right? It requires a host to grow, right? We carry viruses, okay? Hand washing is an important measure for preventing which pathogen from causing foodborne illnesses? Well, let's see. This one is a little trickier because we didn't talk about a lot of these. That's why I want you to go back through and make sure you're looking at your book, because the answer is staph. We've all heard of staph infections, okay? Yeah. So staph infections are those, strep and staph are really contagious, and staph infections are like the things that you pick up in the hospital, and they are really contagious. So just knowing hand washing. But again, if we know that these other things are probably not going to be related to hand washing, I'm trying to see if that's in the, give me a second. It'll be in these graphs on the side, okay? Just know your prevention measures are hand washing, okay? So really spend some time with those those 3 tables that are in here, all right? Oh, did I miss one? I must have taken out a question. All right, folks, I do that sometimes. Let's take a break. What time is it? It is 12:11. Let's break into for 10 minutes. Take a breath. That's a lot of information. And then we'll come back and we'll bang through one more chapter today. Okay? Any questions on this? Like I said, there is really no other way through this than studying it and memorizing it. Okay? And I have here on page 56, this nice little summary is also a really good, gives you some good tips for ways of remembering things. Okay? So this chapter is just really dense. There's a lot in it. Okay? All right.